Hey everybody, welcome to Active Self-Protection Extra. Today on John's Briefs, we're back with Stephanie, the CEO. And the reason that I asked her to come and talk with us today is because I want to talk about realistic de-escalation strategies and why they're important legally.
Now more than ever, you need trusted coverage to help you win the fight after the fight. The company I trust and recommend is Firearms Legal Protection. They offer discounts on all their plans at the link in the description. I recommend the premium plan.
So, Stephanie, you and I got to take Force Science Institute's Realistic De-escalation Instructor class a couple of months ago.
Yeah, it was a fantastic class.
I think just really phenomenal information. Now, of course, that class is geared towards law enforcement use of force.
Yep.
And you hear me when you hear me on the badge cams talk about de-escalation, and using those strategies for law enforcement. Today, I want to talk about it for us who are private citizens. So tell me, first of all, why this has become important to you in terms of just your everyday life.
Right. Well, we had seen one of the instructors at the Force Science certification class that I had taken, and he really opened my eyes up to how some of these strategies might be able to apply to me in my home life, because we're dealing with some emotional and mental health issues in my home, and so the ability to have effective de-escalation strategies. And I just felt like that could really have huge implications for me, not only professionally as we look at these videos and try to analyze what could be done, what are the best practices, and what should we be trying to do, but also is that something I could apply in my own personal home life, was what I was specifically looking at. And boy, have I found it has overlap far beyond even, I think, what we'd hoped to get out of the class.
Now, I think, okay, so we're gonna maybe think about doing a series on realistic de-escalation. Well, I've done some on verbal judo, you've seen that on the channel, and we've got some of that. Man, having since taken the Force Science class, I've got some better strategies, some really additional stuff, and we'll talk about that. But I want to talk about the legal end of it right now, okay? So the basic thing that we talk about all the time, and here's our basic paradigm. It's first establish contact, right? And I think even before we talk about that, it's recognizing what kind of a situation are we in, and do we have any discretionary time in order to establish contact with somebody?
Right. Obviously, if somebody has a gun to their spouse's head when you walk in, you're out of time already at that point. You need to start deciding, is this something that we can even try to de-escalate? Do we have options here? Or are, like you say, are we out of discretionary time and have to start?
So let's define discretionary time. A discretionary time is when I don't have to act to save my person, right? So a crackhead, threatens me with a knife from right here and says, "Give me your freaking wallet." I'm out of discretionary time.
Right.
I have to act right now in order to save my life. But what we're kind of thinking about here is that person who is, maybe it's a domestic situation, or maybe it's that angry person at the grocery store or in the parking lot. Right now, I can see there's a lot of anger because a lot of states are starting to remove their mask mandates, and so you're seeing people who are starting to get angry at each other because they are or aren't wearing a mask, one way or the other. I see it go both ways. And so
road rage situation,
road rage, those kinds of things. And so do you think that from a legal perspective this matters if I've tried to de-escalate?
I mean, I think like everything else, your perspective and how you're able to explain why you did what you did and what you were thinking, and put that in a framework that makes sense to the legal, moral, ethical, sane people on your jury, I think that only helps you. It doesn't matter if you do the best, most correct choice in that moment. If you don't have a good way to explain it, you could have problems. So I think it could probably go either way. If someone looks at it and feels like you could have de-escalated that, you didn't even try, it could potentially cause you some problems. I know for me, I don't want to get in a gunfight. I think most people are going to want to avoid that and expect other people to want to avoid that. So if it looks to me like you had an opportunity to avoid it and you didn't take it, I'm going to wonder why you didn't. You're going to have a good explanation for me if I'm on the jury. Why did you not avoid that?
So I think where people are going to argue with this is this idea of stand your ground. Like, I have the right to stand my ground, but are those the same thing?
I think, how I feel about this. Stand your ground, I think, is so totally misunderstood. It's almost hard to talk about it in any context without giving this, huge.
We have a whole 2-hour seminar just on stand your ground, and you can go and see that 2 hours worth. It's like $10, okay?
So for that, I don't want to obviously get into any or all of that. I just feel like it's such separate things. Even if you are legally okay to stand your ground in that particular area, if you could avoid a gunfight and you didn't, people are going to reasonably ask, why, as a reasonable person, did you not do it?
Yes. And from a practical perspective, stand your ground does not matter. A reasonable person would remove themselves from a situation if they could.
Right.
And a prudent person certainly would, because you don't want to go through the hundreds of thousands of dollars and months of heartache that a gunfight is going to cost you in terms of defending yourself legally.
And obviously, if you're not in a stand your ground state and it looks like you have the opportunity to de-escalate something and you don't take that opportunity to escape, why are you not? You may have a higher burden there to explain why you didn't. So just have a really good framework to be able to explain your actions. What was going on? What was your thought process? What framework were you putting that in? What background do you have that helped you frame these decisions? I think can be really helpful. It can not only help you make the right decisions, but help you explain why I made those decisions.
Let's start there first. Make the right decisions, right? De-escalation, escape, and avoidance is what a good, sane, sober, moral, prudent person would do. And so if you don't use those de-escalation skills, then a prosecuting attorney as well as a jury in a civil case is going to use that in their determination as to who was acting reasonably, who's the victim here. So I think of road rage, right? And you guys know I've talked about this on the channel before, where people have, come up, cut me off, or I inadvertently, got in someone's lane closer than they wanted, cut them off is what they'd call that, whatever. And they come up, man, heck with you, screw you, I'm gonna beat you up. And if you go, yeah, go for it, come on, punk, let's go. You wanna go? I dare you. Well, now you're provoking. Now you are not de-escalating.
It looks a lot like mutual combat at that point.
Now we're in a fight. It's not an assault, it's a fight. We've agreed to fight. And so from a legal perspective, that can get me in trouble.
Right.
So one of the things that we always talk about is that good, sane, sober, moral people try to de-escalate. They try to get out of fights if they can. Now I know that's going to pop up against some people's machismo. That's going to pop up against some people's ego, right? But let's talk about that just a second. What do you say to somebody that says, yeah, but I don't have to do that? I mean, that's not my responsibility.
Right, and it may not be, but how often are we entering into things in life that it doesn't matter what's right, wrong, or indifferent. You make the right choice because you want to avoid the consequences of making the wrong choice. Even if you have this, you don't have to de-escalate. Okay, so you don't have to. But then are you willing to pay the price that is the consequences that are going to come to you because of that? Are you willing to potentially lose your house as you have to borrow against it to pay your legal bills? Potentially deal with, we know there's a lot of emotional fallout from a defensive encounter, lose your family perhaps. That is not remotely unusual. That's actually.
Very true.
You think right now you're super secure in your marriage, but you haven't been through the aftermath of a defensive encounter either. So are you willing to take everything dear to you and put it sort of on the center of that table and see if you still have the winning hand at the end of it? So I think that it's just really important to realize, is your ego worth what you may lose? Is it worth your home? Is it worth your family? Is it worth your job? How many times do we hear about defensive encounters where someone has lost their job, even if they behaved?
We've seen it in national news. And yet they've lost that. So here's the thing, from a legal perspective, I really want you to consider how important it is to de-escalate, escape, and evade. And that is not simply a thing where, the criminal gets all of the advantages. No, they're responsible for them too. But you are responsible to be a good, sane, sober, moral, prudent person. Just write those words down. Today I will be a good, sane, sober, moral, prudent person. And if you are that person, guess what those people do? They de-escalate conflicts, is what they do. They walk away from fights. They apologize when they cut somebody off in traffic. They use the discretionary time that they have available to get out of a way of a problem, or say, hey man, you're right, my bad. And they use that time effectively to try to connect with people and to then bring the conflict levels down and get away from them before they become physical or, God forbid, deadly.
And you can look at that as a way of protecting your family. I mean, in the moment, you may be forced to protect yourself or your family through using some sort of violence, physical, deadly force, whatever it is. But if you don't have to, you are protecting your family from the consequences of a deadly force encounter, which can be severe. So if you're having difficulty putting your ego aside there, perhaps thinking about the way that protects your family is the important thing to do, and embrace that ethic that I'm a protector, and that means protecting in all of these ways, not just in the moment from whatever is happening.
So, watch the Verbal Judo series here on the channel, would you? Do that because it's helpful to you. We're going to put out a whole series on realistic de-escalation strategies for self-defenders, for private citizens as well. And I'm excited about that. That's going to be a class that we're teaching in person. We'll put some of those up as well. But guys, please hear me. This is important legally. Steph, thanks for the time.